Howdy, 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 my name's Sasuke, and welcome back to Let's Read About Cryptids. How many cryptids we do today depends on how long the video ends up being once we get through the first three. So, of the cryptids I was handed, there was Bigfoot, but then also Sasquatch. So I decided to look up Bigfoot versus Sasquatch, and the first result I got was something about Yetis? Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and Yetis. So we're going to open that. But we're also going to look at this How Stuff Works article that looks like it came out last month. So, first off, Newsweek. I don't know offhand how reputable... I don't know if that's the word I want. Reputable? Yeah. Newsweek is? I'm pretty sure it's one of the good ones. I'm honestly not sure. I don't really keep up with the news like that. Because the news is very, very depressing right now. The first photograph tracks left by what is believed to be a Yeti. Look kind of cool. For decades, a dedicated group of men and women have vowed to drag into the light their mysterious quarry, Bigfoot, a mysterious beast that has inspired books, movies, and research. This story is an excerpted from... The word looks weird written out like that. From Newsweek Special Edition Bigfoot, the Science Sightings and the Search for America's Elusive Legend. What is it, a book? And the annals of... Sorry, I can read more now. In the annals of mankind's common history, stories of a large ape-like humanoid consistently crop up, some more believable than others. Here's a breakdown of the monikers used to label creatures people have described as seeing for centuries. Sasquatch. The term Sasquatch has become the most universally respected name for the enigmatic primate-person hybrid, derived from the Holocomelum dialectical word Sasquatch, meaning wild man. The word was first used by the Coast Salish peoples. These indigenous peoples inhabited the Fraser Valley in the Pacific Northwest and parts of Vancouver Island, British Columbia. Two regions that have yielded more recorded Sasquatch sightings than anywhere else. Bigfoot. Perhaps the most common shorthand for Sasquatch, the term Bigfoot came about in 1958. Gerald Crew, a Bluff Creek local in Del Norte County, California, was featured in the Humboldt Times for the cast he made of large footprints found in his bulldozer. Fellow Bluff Creek locals began referring to the mysterious maker of the tracks as Bigfoot, which Humboldt Times editor and Andrew Gonzola decided to stylize as Bigfoot. The term has earned considerable recognition since then, particularly in its use by the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, one of the most widely respected group of Bigfooters. And then there's the Yeti. Though commonly associated with Sasquatch, the Yeti is an entirely different entity. This creature's origin can be traced back to the pre-Buddhist Eastern civilizations, particularly in the Himalayan mountain region. Unlike the Sasquatch, who is most frequently spotted in warm or mild climates, the Yeti is believed to be an Arctic creature, get back here you, that is usually described as resembling a bear more than an ape. Some early indigenous people of the Himalayas would worship what became known as the Yeti, calling it the glacier being. And then there's the Abominable Snowmen. The term was first coined in 1921 by Henry Newman, a contributor to the Indian English language newspaper The Statesman. Newman interviewed participants in the British Mount Everest reconnaissance expedition who encountered large footprints that their guides declared were left by what they called Metokongmi. I probably said that very wrong. Kongmi does translate to snowman. While it translates to snowman, Meto actually translates to man-bear. So it's man-bear-snowman? In writing his piece, Newman mistranslated the term to filthy, which he then swapped out for abominable. One and the same with the Yeti, the Abominable Snowman is generally regarded as an illusory being of the far eastern hemisphere and not interchangeable with the Sasquatch. That smile. Alrighty then. So that was Newsweek's take on it. Now it's time for How Stuff Works. What is the difference between Sasquatch and Bigfoot? According to Newsweek, nothing. But let's see what science has to say about it. Who's that ahead? Is it Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or something else? Bigfoot is one of the most enduring legends in North American history, a shadowy, hairy creature that roams the forest undetected. The beast is by no means new. It's been leaving huge footprints all over the country's culture for centuries. Along the way, Bigfoot's acquired a lot of names, including Sasquatch, Stone Giant, Bushman, Tree Man, and many others, often based on words of Native American origin. Though there may be slight variations in the folklore behind these names, they're all essentially Bigfoot. The Salish Indians of the Pacific Northwest and Vancouver Island were the first to use the name Sasquatch, which was derived from the Salish word Sekwak, meaning wild men, which I've said wrong. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, Sasquatch is usually described as an ape-like creature that walks upright, covered in long dark brown, black, or reddish fur, and standing anywhere from 6 to 15 feet, which is 2 to 4 meters tall for the rest of the world. It's alleged to move silently or else give out a high-pitched cry. Bigfoot, a name for Sasquatch, was first coined in 1958 by a Humboldt County, California columnist named Andrew Gonzoli, who recounted a letter from a newspaper reader claiming to have discovered huge footprints of unknown origin. In his response, an amused Gonzoli wrote, "Maybe we have a relative of the Abominable Snowmen of the Himalayas, or our own Wandering Willie of the Wachpeck." Those words struck a chord with readers who wanted to know more, and helped lay the foundation for Bigfoot and its eventual worldwide fame. Gonzoli sent a reporter named Betty Allen out to the Bluff Creek worksite, where Bigfoot was allegedly spotted, to see the tracks it had made, and talked with the workers. Originally, Gonzoli called the creature Bigfoot, but then changed his name to Bigfoot because he thought it looked better in print. Further articles from the pair, along with photos of the tracks, caught the attention of the press all over the U.S. So, is Bigfoot real? Ancient Native Americans created now famous hairy man pictographs in Central California in honor of a massive unnamed creature. The pictographs seem to depict a beast of nearly 9 feet, 2.6 meters, tall, with an entire family by its side. This bit of visual history could be thousands of years old, evidence that this legend has incredibly long history. There are also stories of Bigfoot-like creatures in other cultures. The Yeti is a bear-like creature of the Himalaya mountains. With roots in pre-Buddhist history, the Yeti is spotted only in cold, snowy climates and often at high altitudes. Then there's the Abominable Snowman, so named in 1921 by Henry Newman, a writer who recounted the adventures of British climbers who had just returned from Mount Everest. They told of huge footprints in the snow that their local guides were said were left by the Mato Kangmi, basically meaning man-bear-snowman. Newman used a bit of creative license and decided that Abominable Snowman sounded better. Some experts say that the Yeti and the Abominable Snowman are the same thing, but not the same as Sasquatch. Evidence of Bigfoot. No one has ever captured a Bigfoot, but they've found the footprints it leaves behind. Some are nearly 2 feet long, 60 centimeters, and others 8 inches, 20 centimeters wide. My bad, there's no others. The calling card of a massive creature that experts say veers between docility and hostility, depending on the situation and personality of the particular being. The most famous bit of evidence, by far, for Bigfoot's existence is the 1967 Patterson-Gimlin film. Just 1 minute long, the jerky footage was created by Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson, who were near Bluff Creek, California, playing with a rented video camera when they spotted a mysterious creature. They managed to capture a few moments of a supposed Bigfoot as it was walking away. In one iconic frame, the creature turns to look at the camera, a bit of incredible imagery that made the two men household names. With so many sightings and so many witnesses over the decades and centuries, skeptics point out that we still have no concrete evidence that Bigfoot exists. And that's strange. After all, says David Bacara, human bones are all over the place. Why haven't we found Bigfoot remains too? As the owner of the Expedition Bigfoot, the Sasquatch Museum, located in Cherry Log, Georgia, Bacara spent about 40 years of his life trying to come up with definitive proof of Bigfoot. He confirms that Bigfoot and Sasquatch are one and the same. We should have some physical evidence of the millions that have lived and died 200 million years ago to now, he says. That lack of hard evidence, he says, doesn't square with the hundreds of witnesses who've claimed to see Bigfoot with their own eyes. He and his wife, Melinda, are among them. He recalls a 2010 investigation when they observed 2 Bigfoots at night using a thermal camera. For about 10 minutes they watched the creatures, which eventually walked back into the Florida swamp. Sadly, his pricey camera didn't have recording capability. Bakar is a longtime member of the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, and he's heard every possible explanation for the creature's existence, as well as for the lack of proof. Some of his cohorts think that Bigfoot is an extraterrestrial. Perhaps they have cloaking abilities or some sort of characteristics that make them impossible to pin down, dead or alive. He says others believe Bigfoot has paranormal roots, and that these things are some kind of spirits that can come and go. A lot of very good witnesses have seen these things just vanish right in front of them. Perhaps he speculates they have an ability to access special portals that whisk them away once they've been spotted. His take? In my opinion, they're just not a natural animal of this world. It's an animal that didn't come to Earth through normal natural processes. That's the best I can tell you. Encountering Bigfoot. If you should stumble upon a Bigfoot while you're out in the forest, Bakar says to be cautious. It's not like running into a predictable large animal like a deer or an elk. Walk away. Leave him alone. He says that many people believe they'd stick around to take pictures or video in order to get proof of the encounter, but the reality is that most likely you'll be too freaked out to care. If you spot a Bigfoot, you've essentially seen something that shouldn't exist. It's like coming face to face with a bull elephant, and then all that bravery you thought you had is gone in the blink of an eye because you realize you're facing a super predator. His advice? Let Bigfoot be. Because whether you call it Sasquatch or any other name, it's not the kind of creature you want to face off with alone in the wild. I suppose we should look at that video. CBC. Where is this taking us? Or is it doing the thing where it's trying to open a pop-up and it just will not? Open in a new window. Cowboy behind legendary film marks. Okay. Or did it finally open? Nope. Oh, okay, it didn't open because it's gone. That's not suspicious at all. Okay, so that's... I think that's probably about the best we're going to get about Bigfoot. Next up is the Loch Ness Monster, which is one of those things where you always hear about it and you make jokes about it, but I've never really thought to look into it. So we got Britannica.com, which they wrote an article about it 3 weeks ago. And then we also got the BBC and History.com. So let's check the one from 3 weeks ago first. Last updated. Does that mean somebody saw Nessie this month? I wouldn't be surprised with everything else that seems to be happening this year. The Loch Ness Monster, by name Nessie, large marine creature believed by some... I feel like there should... believed by people to inhabit Loch Ness, Scotland. However, much of the alleged evidence supporting its existence has been discredited, and it is widely thought that the monster is a myth. Is this just giving me the definitions of the words right because it's Encyclopedia Britannica? Of course it is. Reports of a monster inhabiting Loch Ness date back to ancient times. Notably, local stone carvings by the Pict depict a mysterious beast with flippers. The first written account appears in a biography of St. Columba from 565 AD. According to that work, the monster bit a swimmer and was prepared to attack another man when Columba intervened, ordering the beast to go back. It obeyed, and over the centuries only occasional sightings were reported. Many of these alleged encounters seem inspired by Scottish folklore, which abounds with mythical water creatures. In 1990, no, not 90, that's 2 3s. In 1933, the Loch Ness Monster's legend began to grow. At the time, a road adjacent to Loch Ness was finished, offering an unobstructed view of the lake. In April, a couple saw an enormous animal, which they compared to a dragon or prehistoric monster, and after it crossed their car's path, it disappeared into the water. Y'all just skipped straight past dinosaur? Okay. The incident was reported in a Scottish newspaper, and numerous sightings followed. In December 1933, the Daily Mail commissioned Marmaduke Wetherell, Marmaduke Wetherell, a big game hunter, to locate the sea serpent. Along the lake shores, he found large footprints that he believed belonged to a very powerful, soft-footed animal about 20 feet long. Well, 6 meters long. Metres. However, upon closer inspection, zoologists at the Natural History Museum determined that the tracks were identical and made with an umbrella stand or ashtray that had hippopotamus legs as a base. Weatherall's role in the hoax was unclear. I'm gonna need you to stop. The news only seemed to spur efforts to prove the monster's existence. In 1934, English physician Robert Kenneth Wilson, that's 3 names you know he's important, photographed the alleged creature. The iconic image, known as the surgeon's photograph, appeared to show the monster's small head and neck. The Daily Mail printed the photograph, sparking an international sensation. And he speculated that the creature was a plesiosaur, a marine reptile that went extinct some 65.5 million years ago. The Loch Ness area attracted numerous monster hunters. Over the years, several sonar explorations, notably in 1987 and 2003, were undertaken to locate the creature, but none were successful. In addition, numerous photographs allegedly showed the beast, but most were discredited as fakes or as depicting other animals and objects. Notably, in 1994, it was revealed that Wilson's photograph was a hoax spearheaded by a revenge-seeking weather owl. The monster was actually a plastic and wooden head attached to a toy submarine. Why did he want revenge? That guy didn't do anything to him. In 2018, researchers conducted a DNA survey of Loch Ness to determine what organisms live in the waters. No signs of a plesiosaur or other such large animal were found, though the results indicated the presence of numerous eels. This finding left open the possibility that the Loch Ness Monster is an oversized eel. Okay. Despite the lack of conclusive evidence, the Loch Ness Monster remained popular and profitable. In the early 20th century, it was thought that it contributed to nearly $80 million annually to Scotland's economy. I'm not sure I see what was added 3 weeks ago, but let's get that out of here. What else about the Loch Ness Monster? Plausible theory. When did this article come out? August of last year. This must be about when they did the thing. An international team of scientists say they have identified a plausible theory for sightings of the Loch Ness Monster. The team took 250 water samples at various depths, that's important, probably, throughout the loch last year, collecting all forms of environmental DNA for further analysis. Why did they not come face to face with Nessie? The scientists say they have a biological explanation for her. The team will announce the results of their studies next month. Okay? Then what is the point of this article? Honestly, what is the point of this article if they announced them in September? The DNA was extracted in a sequence resulting in about 500 million sequences that have now been analyzed against existing databases. Geneticist Professor Neil Gemmell said, "There have been over 1,000 reported sightings of something in Loch Ness which have driven this notion of a monster being in the water. From those sightings, there are around 4 main explanations about what has been seen. Our research essentially discounts most of those theories. However, one theory remains plausible. He might have had an accent, but I'm not going to try to do it in case I blunder it. This theory, along with the full results of the explanation, will be revealed at an event in Drummondracket." And then it's just talking about what the Loch Ness Monster is. Let's see if we can get that information. Loch Ness theory. Oh, it's just the thing about being a giant eel. Okay. That's about it for Loch Ness Monster. I recently did read about the Flatwoods Monster myself because of Fallout 76. And I haven't, in that game, I haven't seen it yet. But what I did find is that it may have influenced the aliens in Majora's Mask. But let's check out what the history says. And then there's also West Virginia culture because it's in West Virginia. Because of course it's in West Virginia. History stories. It looks like a light bulb. In 1952, the Flatwoods Monster terrified 6 kids, a mom, a dog, and the nation. It prompted a U.S. Air Force UFO inquiry as part of an initiative called Project Blue Book. Okay. The Flatwoods Monster has not hissed at boys in the little village of Flatwoods, West Virginia since September the 12th, 1952. That's a start. People grin about it now and take monster souvenir money from hundreds of monster tourists every week. But it scared people plenty back then, including the eyewitnesses. 6 boys aged 10 to 17, a dog, and a mom. "One of the boys peed his pants," said John Gibson, a high school freshman at the time who knew them all. "Their dog, Ricky, ran with his tail between his legs." The encounter made the local and national news, scaring a wider swath of people. Then it prompted U.S. Air Force UFO inquiry. Gotta get all them letters. Part of a project called Project Blue Book that dispatched a handful of investigators around the country to look into such claims. It also became a local legend. A southern spook story that defined this tiny village of less than 300 people for more than 6 decades. That's 60 years. That's this many. You can't see how many fingers I'm holding up, but rest assured, it's 6 of them. Well, 5 and a thumb. To this day, tourists come out of their way to Flatwoods, secluded in the low, timbered Appalachian hills of central West Virginia, to visit its monster museum and buy green monster tchotchkes and t-shirts. I've never seen that word written out. That's a weird looking word. The original drawing of the Flatwoods Monster by a New York sketch artist. What they witnessed. It was dusk when they saw it. The May brothers, Ed, 13, and Freddie, 12, had been playing in their schoolyard with their 10-year-old friend Tommy Heyer. After noticing a pulsing red light streak across the sky and crash on a nearby farm, the 3 youngsters ran to grab the May boys' mother, then hightailed it up that hill to check out where the light had landed. A few other boys, one with a dog, showed up too. They ran back down in sheer incredible terror. 7 Braxton County residents on Saturday reported seeing a 10-foot Frankenstein-like monster in the hills above Flatwoods, a local newspaper reported afterwards. A National Guard member, 17-year-old Gene Lemon, was leading the group when he saw what appeared to be a pair of bright eyes in a tree. Lemon screamed and fell backwards, the news account said, when he saw a 10-foot monster with a bloody red body and a green face that seemed to glow. It may have had claws for hands. It was hard to tell because of the dense mists. The story made the local news, and then got picked up by national radio and big papers all over the country, said Andrew Smith, who runs the Flatwoods Monster Museum and the Braxton County Convention's Visitors Bureau. Ms. May and the National Guard kid ended up going to New York to talk with CBS, Gibson said. Believers, doubters, and cashers in. Those people were the most scared people I've ever seen, said local newspaper publisher A. Lee Stewart in that 1952 news story. Stewart himself had marched up that hill with a shotgun after witnesses told what they saw. People don't make up that kind of story that quickly. Others doubted. State police laughed off the reports as hysteria, the newspaper story said. They said the so-called monster had grown from 7 to 17 feet in just 24 hours. Gibson doubted too, though he since sold 1,000 of his 12-inch tall ceramic green monster figurines in just the last 2 years, at $30 a piece. I don't believe in the Easter Bunny, says Gibson, an insurance agent still working at 81. I don't believe in Santa, and I really don't believe in the Flatwoods Monster. But I do want to boost our community. An era of bomb scares and demagogues. But rattled eyewitnesses weren't the only reason the story took off. Americans were truly frightened in 1952, made anxious by atomic bombs and what seemed like a new world made by mad scientists. Even Life magazine, probably the most popular publication in the nation at the time, had just a few months earlier published a seemingly credible trend story about flying saucers. Spook stories sprout best when the seed lands in a bed fertile with anxiety. And that was 1952 Cold War America, a hothouse of anger, disillusionment, and anxieties made to order for conspiracy theorists, political demagogues, and tellers of suspenseful tales. The May Brothers monster story hit just 3 years after the Soviet Union successfully tested an atomic bomb in 1949. The Air Force was scanning for bombers over our skies. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were awaiting execution for sending American nuclear weapon designs to the Soviets, selling hellfire to our mortal enemies. A political demagogue, so Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin, has spent the previous 2 years stoking fears that communists had infiltrated not only the U.S. Department of State, but almost every industry and corner of the nation. And communists had killed thousands of American soldiers in Korea by 1952, including 4 youngsters, 21 or younger, from Braxton County, West Virginia, who died just months before the monster landed. One of those killed in action, U.S. Marine PFC Lantry R. Frame, age 20, had grown up in Sutton, only 6 miles from the Mayboys in Flatwoods. I'm not 100% sure why we needed this particular amount of detail about the Flatwoods Monster, history.com, but okay. Into that fertile American atmosphere of fear and death and demagoguery, Life dropped a bombshell headline. Have we visitors from space? The Air Force is now ready to concede that many saucer and fireball sightings still defy explanation, Life's summary headline said. Life offers some scientific evidence that there is a real case for interplanetary saucers. Their story, filled with seemingly credible accounts, including from eyewitness Air Force pilots, appeared in April 1952, just 5 months before Ed and Freddie May climbed that hilltop. A piece of wood that was taken from the once standing tree where the Flatwoods sighting occurred in September 12, 1952. The hope of something bigger. How do these stories gain credence? It's not necessarily that millions believe in UFOs, says behavioral psychologist Clay Routledge. Many UFO devotees usually don't believe, he says, but they are seduced by the story. Why? There's hope that we're not just insignificant organisms walking around aimlessly on a rock floating in space, says Routledge, who has studied brain science, UFO beliefs, and culture. There's the hope that we're part of something bigger. Call it cosmic loneliness, Routledge says. That may be. But if the May brothers are familiar with that phrase, they're probably rolling their eyes. Freddie and Ed are still alive and still standing by their story. They're in their late 70s now. They're no longer talking to reporters. They got tired after 100,000 interviews, Smith says, but the brothers did appear in a recent documentary about the Flatwoods Phantom. And in the video trailer teasing to that show, Freddie looks calmly into the camera. As far as for myself, he says, it doesn't matter to me whether people believe or don't believe. Home of the Green Monster. One writer who stoked the story a lot was Gray Barker, a Braxton County native who investigated the monster and then became one of the more prominent UFO myth makers ever. It was Barker who wrote about Flatwoods, then introduced the mythology of government men in black after he heard that 2 Air Force investigators had reportedly shown up in Flatwoods posing as magazine writers. But Barker's friends later said he didn't believe and did the UFO writers cheerfully and for money. To this day, locals still wonder. The universe is a mighty big place, says Joan Bias, news editor at the Braxton Democrat, a local newspaper. I can't imagine we might be alone in it, though I'm a Baptist, so maybe I shouldn't say that. Ha! There were fewer than 300 people, Flatwoods, in 1952 and a few less than that now. You could say the local embrace of the monster was a little slow going, Smith says. Could it have been an owl? What? What do you mean, could it have been an owl? U.S. Air Force doubted too. They later revealed that they'd done UFO research and investigations since 1947, collecting thousands of stories, investigating some with the skeleton staff. About this one, they concluded that bright but common meteors had streaked across the eastern U.S. at dusk that night, seen by many in Baltimore, among other places. And the monster with the claw-like arms? Likely an owl, they said. Even if it's just unproven folklore, the tourists seem to keep coming, so locals did that most of Earth-linked things. They made bumper stickers, shot glasses, and giant monster-shaped chairs that whole families could get into and have their pictures taken while sitting in the monster's scary, embracing arms. They created the Monster Museum. They put up signs on highways, home of the Green Monster. And they learned, to their surprise, that people wanted to hand them money. From spring to fall peak tourist season, hundreds of people a week stop in the spot, Flatwoods Ice Cream and Sandwich Eatery. They eat the Flatwoods Monster Burger, double cheese, and look at all the historic monster photos and news clippings hanging on the wall. The museum has artifacts, including a chunk of the oak tree that the monster had floated out from behind. And so the Flatwoods Monster, also known as the Green Monster, also known as the Phantom of Flatwoods, who was reportedly 7 feet tall, or 10 feet, or 13, or 17, became the most peculiar American invention, a legend emblazoned on t-shirts. If you know how I could get a 26-foot fiberglass green monster statue made for Flatwoods, just let me know, Gibson said. That'd be a big draw, don't you think? Okay. Honestly, having started with the history.com thing about the Flatwoods Monster, I don't really feel like we need to read much more about him than that. Because it definitely sounds like that one is just, kids saw a thing, kids got scared, city went, that's bogus, but money, and so on. Which brings us to Llarona, which I've never heard of, except in passing in a YouTube video a couple of weeks ago. But it says Legends of America, and it's got a movie. Okay. Llarona, Weeping Woman of the Southwest. The Legend of Llarona, pronounced Llarona. Llarona? Okay, my bad. Spanish for the Weeping Woman has been part of Hispanic culture. I probably should have known it was La Llorona because me amo, but I haven't really had to think about Spanish in a while to speak it. Dismiss. The tall, thin spirit is said to be blessed with natural beauty and long, flowing black hair. Wearing a white gown, that goes really good with the flowing black hair. Is this the lady? I might have heard of this, but I don't know why I might have heard of this, if it is what I think it is. Wailing into the night and searching for children to drag screaming to a watery grave. I may have heard of this, but why? No one really knows when the legend of La Llorona began or from where it originated. Though the tales vary from source to source, the one common thread is that she is the spirit of a doomed mother who drowned her children and now spends eternity searching for them in rivers and lakes. Did I read about this when I was trying to do creepypastas for Halloween one year? Because this sounds familiar. La Llorona, christened Maria, was born to a peasant family in a humble village. Her startling beauty captured the attention of both the rich and the poor men of the area. She was said to have spent her days in her humble peasant surroundings, but in the evenings, she would don her best white gown and thrill the men who admired her in the local fandangos. Soon to be grim fandangos. Ha ha! References. The young men anxiously awaited for her arrival, and she reveled in the attention that she received. However, La Llorona had two small sons who made it difficult for her to spend evenings out, and often she left them alone while she cavorted with the gentlemen during the evenings. One day, the two small boys were found drowned in the river. Some say they drowned through her neglect, but others say that they may have died by her own hand. Scroll. Another legend says that La Llorona was a caring woman full of life and love, who married a wealthy man who lavished her with gifts and attention. However, after she bore him two sons, he began to change, returning to a life of womanizing and alcohol, leaving her for months at a time. He seemingly no longer cared for the beautiful Maria, even talking about leaving her to marry a woman of his own wealthy class. When he did return home, it was only to visit his children, and the devastated Maria began to feel resentment towards the boys. One evening, as Maria was strolling with her two children on a shady pathway near the river, her husband came by in a carriage with an elegant lady beside him. He stopped and spoke to his children, but ignored Maria, and then drove the carriage down the road without looking back. After seeing this, Maria went into a terrible rage, and turning against her children, she seized them and threw them into the river. As they disappeared downstream, she realized what she had done and ran down the bank to save them, but it was too late. Maria broke down into inconsolable grief, running down the street, screaming and wailing. The beautiful La Llorona mourned them day and night. During this time, she would not eat and walked along the river in her white gown, searching for her boys, hoping they would come back. She cried endlessly as she roamed the riverbanks, and her gown became soiled it, and torn. When she continued to refuse to eat, she grew thinner and appeared taller until she looked like a walking skeleton. Still a young woman, she finally died on the banks of the river. Not long after her death, her restless spirit began to appear, walking the banks of the Santa Fe River when darkness fell. Her weeping and wailing became a curse of the night, and people began to be afraid to go out after dark. She was said to have been seen drifting between the trees on along the shoreline, or floating on the current with her long white gown spread out upon the waters. On many a dark night, people would see her walking along the riverbank and crying for her children. And so, they no longer spoke of her as Maria, but rather La Llorona, the Weeping Woman. Children are warned not to go out in the dark, for La Llorona might snatch them, throwing them to their deaths in the flowing waters. Which is a weird thing to tell your children, considering the whole reason she's a ghost is because she regrets having done that. It's like, oh, watch out for La Llorona, she'll throw you into the river just like she did her kids, even though she's only a ghost because she wishes she hadn't done that. So spooky. Woo! Though the legends vary, the apparition is said to act without hesitation or mercy. The tales of her cruelty depend on the version of the legend you hear. Some say she kills indiscriminately, taking men, women, and children, whoever is foolish enough to get close enough to her. Others say she's very barbaric and kills only children, dragging them screaming to a watery grave. When Patricio Lugan was a boy, he and his family saw her on a creek between Mora and Guadalupita, New Mexico. As the family was sitting outside talking, they saw a tall, thin woman walking along the creek. She seemed to float over the water, started up the hill, and vanished. However, just moments later, she reappeared much closer to them and then disappeared again. The family looked for footprints and finding none, had no doubt that the woman they had seen was Llarona. Llarona. She has been seen along many rivers across the entire Southwest, and the legends have become part of Hispanic culture everywhere. Part of the legend is that those who do not treat their families well will see her and she will teach them a lesson. Another story involved a man by the name of Epifanio Garcia? Epifanio? Who was an outspoken boy who often argued with his mother and father. After a heated argument, Epifanio, along with his brothers Carlos and Augustine, decided to leave their ranch in Ojo de la Vaca, to head towards the Villa Real de Santa Fe. However, when they were along their way, they were visited by a tall woman wearing a black tapelo and black net over her face. Two of the boys were riding in the front of the wagon when the spirit appeared on the seat between them. She was silent and continued to sit there until Epifanio finally turned the horses around and headed back home, at which time she said, "I will visit you again someday when you argue with your mother." Dang. But she wasn't even wearing white that time. In Santa Fe, New Mexico, the tall wailing spirit has been seen repeatedly in the Para Building, Public Employees Retirement Association, which is built on land that was once an old Spanish Indian graveyard and is near the Santa Fe River. Many people who have been employed there tell of hearing cries resounding through the walls and feeling unseen hands pushing them while on the stairways. Llarona has been heard at night wailing next to rivers by many, and her wanderings have grown wider, following Hispanic people wherever they go. Her movements have been traced throughout the Southwest and as far north as Montana on the banks of the Yellowstone River. The Hispanic people believe that the Weeping Woman will always be with them, following the many rivers looking for her children, and for this reason, many of them fear the dark and pass the legend from generation to generation. Reader stories. Let's see. La Llorona woke me up once when I was camping at Indian Falls Rapids on the Yamta River in Colorado when I was 15. I walked with her to a cabin and there was a man in the bed. All I saw was his foot, but when she yelled at me to run, I did. If I didn't smash my toe on a rock, I would have run off the cliff into the Indian Falls Rapids. I saw an article in this month's Mountain Gazette about her and looked her up on the internet. My experience was 21 years ago. What? That's weird. Let's see. There's a lot of these. So there's more personal stories than there are actually information about the lady. Interesting. And of course, like I said, there's a movie about it. The movie just came out last year? Really? Huh. The Curse of La Llorona. And it's 38 minutes long, so this is probably about a good stopping point. The next episode, we're finally going to actually reach Siren Head, which is, like, the push that made me start doing this in the first place, more or less. I kind of was expecting Siren Head to not really be a thing anymore by the time I got to this point, but it looks like both Jacksepticeye and Markiplier just found a game about him that the only reason I would play it, just because it might be interesting, but my computer probably can't run it, so I'll just have to settle for watching them do it. If you like this, a like and subscribe will be groovy. If you didn't, you need to do either one of those things. If you want to click the bell, you can do that as well, and I will see y'all in the next one. Later.